Welcome to the Empowered Spirit Show. This is your host, Terri and Heiman. I'll explore the connection to the human spirit in a way that helps to navigate your life, including crisis. I am passionate about helping you to open up to your intuition and the metaphysical world of spirit to find your confidence in your own inner guidance. Take a pause, be inspired, learn ways to show up focused, centered, and more dynamic in your everyday life. Happy Valentine's Day and welcome back to the Empowered Spirit Show. Thank you so much for tuning in and joining me today. As we celebrate a day dedicated to love, it's the perfect time to talk about dreaming of new love and opening our hearts to new possibilities. The universe, it seems, is conspiring to help us with this. And yes, we are in a huge transition. We are experiencing numerous cosmic forces at work. February is a transitional month. We are standing at the gateway of cosmic energy. An intense wave of energy is washing over us, inviting us to dream bigger, especially towards our most heartfelt desires. On February 17th, we'll experience a rare and powerful alignment, a dramatic annular solar eclipse, a ring of fire happening on the very same day as the Lunar New Year. This ushers in the vibrant and dynamic year of the fire horse. The fire horse symbolizes passion, freedom, courage, and an untamable spirit. All energies that can fuel our quest for love and connection. All of these transitions and cosmic forces causes us and allows us to break free from self-imposed limitations, to move with an unwavering perseverance, and to embrace a life filled with more passion and love. This is a time of transformation for choosing motion over inertia and for courageously galloping into a new chapter of our lives. Yes, and I am right there with all that energy. Here I am in this makeshift studio. I am in a phase of kind of living out of the boxes, getting ready to sell my house and move. It's a little bit daunting, I will admit. And I may sound a little echoey today as I makeshift all my work, but this is what transitioning is all about. I know I've had my moments of anxiety, frustrations, and even a little car trouble in the midst of it all. But the great thing that I do have that is consistent is my spiritual practice. Tuning in every day, meditating. I'll tell you, meditation really helps focus my third eye, keeps me strong and on target, and it has helped me constantly come back to grounding and being centered, because yes, I am being asked to go through a lot of changes. I mean, I know I want this transition, and many of us, we do want transitions, but it can still be challenging, and the letting go can be a little hard. I know I've been kind of laughing at myself here and there. Some of the things that we can get attached to, like all these crystals in my background. Yes, my house is filled with crystals, and some of them I don't want to let go of because they are like family to me. I really know and believe and trust that I do have past life in Lemuria. And so, yes, they keep firing my energy field and keep me strong. And so, yes, they are coming with me, most of them anyway. But there are other things that I've noticed around my house that I'm attached to, like my sauna, for instance. But the way in which I've been handling it is really offering gratitude to all these many things that I have. I even have a lot of my parents' stuff that just kind of came with me when I moved here after my parents passed, and even offering them gratitude. All the many blessings, even when we have to let go of things that we really love in our life, it can be challenging and overwhelming. But the gratitude does. It lifts my heart. It keeps me strong, and really, it makes me recognize there are so many more important things in life than things. And yes, I can see the light at the end of the tunnel, because finally here it comes. You know, I've been talking about moving for a very long time, but now that it's coming, and as humans, the human nature, it's kind of like, oh no, here it is, really? But we take a breath, we pause, we use the tools that we have that will help us through these transitions. I know I feel little tears coming out of my eyes as I talk about this. So, what about you? Are you standing on the threshold of changing your life or wanting to change your life, but not sure how to do it or what the tools are that you need to work with to help you move through? Schedule a spiritual upgrade breakthrough call with me and let's talk about where you are, what you are searching for, and how these tools, what I call the rights for your everyday life, Reiki, intuition, tarot, EFT, and stones and crystals, can help you make the shifts and allow yourself to move through change and transition with ease and grace. I'll be sure to put the link in the show notes for the call. So today, what better way to harness this powerful energy of dreaming and destiny than by exploring the mystical realm of Déjà Rêvé, the experience of having already dreamed of a future event. Have you already had a dream that came true? Have you ever met someone for the first time and felt an uncanny sense of recognition? A whisper from a dream you once had, like I dreamed of that, or I dreamed of him. Today, we are honored to have a very special guest who has dedicated his work to exploring these profound experiences. We are joined by the author Daniel Burke of the fascinating new book, Déjà Rêvé and Love at Second Sight. We'll be diving deep into the power of our dreams, the mysteries of time and consciousness, and how we all can tap into this innate ability to dream our future into being. Before we begin, let's take a moment to pause and center and set an intention for this amazing new moon eclipse coming in. So wherever you are, if you can, close your eyes for a few moments. Taking a nice deep inhale, expanding the breath up the body. And as you exhale, call all your energy into you. Call it in. Inhale, expanding the breath up the body. And as you exhale, drop right into the heart. Slowing down, centering. Right into this deepest part of your heart. Feel that connection, your spirit and the greater spirit. Know that you are loved, guided, protected. Feeling all this energy coming in around us. As we call in our Reiki masters, we call in the wisdom of teachers that have come before us, the angels to open our hearts with joy and love, the crystal beings for amusement and magnification, and now calling in the higher self right above the crown to help you receive the messages coming in for you. Take another deep inhale and exhale as we take this time to honor the cosmic forces. We find ourselves in the late winter, recognizing the return of the light, recognizing the wisdom and the visions and the dreams that winter have brought us as we prepare to awaken to a new season. Taking a moment, noticing your path in this direction of the north where all this wisdom comes in as you prepare to set these intentions for this new moon eclipse energy. Calling in from the north, the east, the south, and the west, above us, below us, right there in that very center. Setting an intention of how you want to feel as we open up to this new energy. And let that radiate out all around you, setting that energy. Taking another deep inhale and exhale. As we start to bring the awareness back, feel the heart opened. Feel the focus of the third eye coming back, blinking the eyes back open. So my guest today is Daniel Burke. He is an author, poet, and songwriter. He has a background in the natural sciences, the arts, and the video game industry. He has previously been published in the Journal of the Society for Psychical Research, New Dawn Magazine, and the journal Dark Love. He lives in Dublin, Ireland. So let us welcome Daniel to the show. Welcome, Daniel.
Thank you very much for having me. I have the pleasure to be here.
I'm very excited to talk to you, and what a great new book, Déjà Rêvé and Love at Second Sight. How exciting.
Yeah, it's my third book at the moment, and it's kind of dealing generally with the phenomenon of déjà rêvé, which is, if you want me to go into it straight away, It's distinct from déjà vu. Now, déjà vu is we all have experienced that. It's the moment of the sense that this has happened before. I've been here before. I've met this person before. But in the case of déjà rêvé, the origin of the experience is known to the individual. They know for a fact that they have dreamed this moment before. In fact, in some cases, they have recorded this ahead of time, whether it's in a journal or in the kind of corner of a biography. These are experiences that are often had in kind of very short moments, but they sometimes can very greatly impact the life of the individual over the longer term.
How fascinating. Yes, and I have so many questions. But first, I'd like to ask, like, what led you to write this book right now?
Yeah. Well, funny enough, the research for my previous work led me to write this book. It was when I was writing Telepathic Tales, which was my second book, and kind of deals with general telepathic phenomena across cultures and across time. I kind of these kinds of accounts wherein the individual claims to have dreamed that they met this person before or they had been in this place before, they kept turning up. I kept seeing them. And this was later in the research for the book, so I couldn't necessarily include it. And it just kind of took a hold of me, especially the kind of the extent to which these things are less discussed. I think this is an area where there has been very little compiled. And I really wanted to just say, here are many hundreds of accounts. And I wanted the reader to be able to just kind of appreciate the volume of the accounts and understand how commonly these things are occurring, kind of not just historically, not just in the tales and the legends, but among our own contemporaries. And that's the kind of feeling that I try to kind of put out there with my work, that sense of, oh, these interesting things, these fascinating things are still occurring.
Yes, and you have a wonderful forward by Gary Lockman. What a great vouch for the work going on. And I do have a
Mm.
lot of questions, but first I wanted to just ask, like, we know deja vu.
Hmm.
Most people, right? Already felt, already seen, already happened. I guess any of those interpretations. But
Yeah.
the idea of deja reve, dreaming that, that's pretty fascinating. It kind of
Mm.
falls into a little bit of like lucid dreaming. Is that, would you say that's true or not really? Or you can use lucid dreaming to continue that. That's going to be my next question.
Well, yeah, there are some really interesting connections you could make there because, like, Deja Rêvé is not like inherently connected to lucid dreaming, but like you said, you can go the other way around. So, like, for instance, in my own country, Ireland, one of the traditions from among the Druids and the High Kings would be that, you see, it was understood among many ancient cultures that these kinds of things not only occurred spontaneously, but could be kind of engendered. So, for instance, what we call the Tar of Esh, this is the bull sleep. This was a method by which the next king, the next High King of Ireland, would be chosen. And in this case, dreams were actually people were put into a particular type of sleep called the bull sleep. And the idea was that they would specifically dream of the next king of Ireland. And the understanding was that this would be a real person who's really in the world. Then that person would be sought out. So in that sense, there can be an element of lucidity because you're actively attempting to use these dreams towards clairvoyant purposes. And this is something that comes out across the world in China and Japan and India, for example. There are many accounts of emperors who dream of a person and then they call upon their scribe or their painters or their artists to draw the description of this person. And then, based on that description, he sends people out into the world to find them. And of course, according to many of these tales, those people are found. Which, of course, we can look at and say, well, that's an interesting tale, but is that all it is? Well, in this book, I say it's not all it is. People still have these experiences, just like those ancient emperors, just like the ancient druids. And, they're fascinating in their volume, let alone the fact that they occur.
Yeah, I so agree. I so agree. And so I love that concept and that idea. And I journal about my dreams. I've never really drawn, but I have had a
Mm,
dream or two where a new person is coming in. And my tendency is to want to hold on to the dream, like go back into it and work with it.
mm,
And I guess
yeah.
that's kind of what we're talking about doing.
Absolutely. I mean, I've been there myself. Like I've journaled for many years. I have kind of actually this book, working on this book really kind of got me back into journaling my dreams. And this idea you're speaking of wishing to return quickly to the dream. Yeah, I've been there many times also. It's quite fascinating. And sometimes, like just recently I had an experience of like jumping back into the same dream, I think 4 or 5 times in a row. It was a very strange state of consciousness. It was like pretty much any time I closed my eyes, having awoken, I was back there. So, like, in terms of Deja Reve, though, Deja Reve, it is interesting because there are some people who have multiple of these experiences through their lives. I will say that it doesn't seem to be most people, but there are those who do. And again, we can mention these traditional cultures, and we don't even have to go that far back. We can look at early modern England, for example, or the Europe throughout the early modern period. There were many rituals and incantations and spells and that actually specifically were used in order to dream of a future husband, for example. The understanding being that these things were possible. And again, I will say that the historians of the time and our times and those to follow, they often dismissed these so-called superstitions. They turned their nose up at them, said these were the kind of silly beliefs of country people, you know? But again, I would like to show in this book that these are not just such superstitions. These are things that are actively occurring. And I wouldn't be surprised if some of your listeners have experienced this very phenomenon.
Yeah, I agree. And yes, you do give many examples of the folklore, the literature, so many different things. So I think that's awesome because it does give us something to like kind of grasp and hold on to
Mm.
make it quote unquote real, right? But I do think it's interesting. And I'm just curious if maybe sometimes what we've done is put it all under deja vu
Mm.
instead of separating it out into this whole idea of the deja reve.
It's completely accurate. I mean, I I give some examples in the book of where the kind of mainstream outlets or even just kind of popular articles in whether it's CNN, MSNBC, whatever, they kind of deal with deja reve, but kind of fleetingly, and they do conflate it with deja vu, as you mentioned. You know, these things are considered the same. And in fact, one example I really do like to give is that Percy Bysshe Shelley, the Romantic English poet, like one of the this is interesting to me because one of the most famous accounts of so-called deja vu is that of Percy Bysshe Shelley, which he called at the time one of the most remarkable events of his life. However, what is interesting to me is that this is not actually a deja vu experience. This is deja reve, because Shelley states specifically that he dreamed of this moment before. He said, "I suddenly remembered to have seen this exact scene in a dream of long ago." And he said the effect this produced on me was not such that as could have been expected. So this is just a basic experience wherein he was kind of it was when he was in his school days in Oxford, and he was walking with a friend, and he turned and suddenly recognized every detail of the scene, the environment, exactly as if this moment had occurred before. And although this is given as an example of deja vu, he specifies he saw this in a dream. So this is the key distinction, and this mistake is still made. I just read a paper recently about reincarnation in Holland, for example. And, you know, these examples in which people claimed to recognize the place they were in or a person they had seen, ahead, it was called deja vu, but clearly it was deja reve because they specified they had seen it in a dream. Not to ramble on too much on that point, but the distinction is certainly important.
Well, it is, I think it is a very important distinction because I think what we've done is just put it all together. Because in some ways, I would have done the same thing, assumed the same thing, you
Yes.
know. And so I know. I mean, I can like right now as we're talking about this, I have had a recent dream about this, and so
Really?
I can feel that energy. So to me, it is very well. And when we work in the quantum field, it's all the same. It's all past, present, future. It's all right there. And then we can start to bring that into consciousness. I truly believe. I do a lot of visualization. I have a goal, I have a dream. And so I open up into that. I do believe it would be the same kind of energy.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if we are to take these accounts at face value, you know, they do suggest that time, space, consciousness, these things that we think we have solid ideas about are not necessarily, you know, what we think they are. You know, this linearity that we experience, or at least that we document, or, you know, Monday to Friday, you know, January to December, you know, these are kind of waypoints that allow us to navigate the world. But yeah, it could be it does seem to be the case if these accounts are taken at face value that the future, the present, and the past are in some way connected. And we do see we see headlines like this a lot in recent scientific articles. Like I saw something recent about light. being shown to go back in time, for example. And just these little things that make me wonder. I don't make these strong connections in the book, and I don't make any large claims in the book. I let the reader kind of decide what the accounts mean. But yeah, there are a lot of interesting areas in modern science, and especially, as you mentioned, the quantum realm that are suggestive in this regard, absolutely. But I wouldn't be expert enough to tie those things together, with assuredness.
I just kind of laugh a little bit, but I think I read that same article too about going back with science, just coming out with that. But I do a lot of work in that realm of
Hmm.
possibility, opening up into the Akashic records. I read people's records, I help them in their soul energies, even in future too. But when we work with all of this, it is in that liminal realm. It is in that realm that we can visualize and open up to, is what I truly believe. So when I'm seeing this, I'm thinking, okay, the experience of meeting someone in my life, maybe I can continue to go back and work with it. So I do think it's really fascinating, and
Mm.
letting the reader have that experience, and then all the tales and folklore and saints and Sufis and all that you bring forward. I think that's very helpful. Now, there's a few chapters that were very interesting. One of them is you talk about picture perfect.
Mm. Yeah, that was the final chapter. It was one of my favorite chapters personally. It was a chapter where, as opposed to the individual realizing they had dreamed this person before, they dream a person and then meet them as such, quote unquote, meet them or encounter them in an image, a graven image, whether it's a photograph, whether it's even a statue in some ancient accounts, whether it is a newspaper article, etc., etc. There are many of these accounts, and there's one that I do personally find quite interesting. It's kind of one of the first ones, and it's from a Russian woman called Yelena Razduyeva. And in her small village in Russia, she wrote in, just kind of hidden away in the corner of a biography, an account in which she was with somebody at the time. She had a husband, and she dreamed of this other man who told her that he was going to be her husband in the future. And there's a tradition in that village in those days in which young women would write letters to prisoners, and for whatever reason, the handwriting of one of these letters that came back struck Yelena even kind of at that moment, and she wrote back to this person and asked him for a picture of himself. And as she mentioned, she was shocked to discover this was the exact person that she had seen in her dream. And it's interesting because she even tells this to her husband and tells him that this is actually going to be my real lover in the future. And this is something that actually comes out in the tales too. You see a lot of these accounts where kind of people realize, oh, whatever kind of relationship I'm in right now isn't, this dream is telling me this isn't necessarily the right one, and this other person is the right person for me, etc., etc. Now, obviously it's not for me to say if that always turns out accurately, etc. But yeah, this is what they come to believe. Absolutely.
I think it is fascinating. That might have gotten her in a little trouble. I don't know about that, but
Oh, absolutely. Maybe a bad move to express that so openly straight away.
yeah, thinking, well, maybe he died, maybe they divorced, who knows? But yeah,
Yes.
that is risky. But it is kind of interesting the way that comes in. I mean, even through the handwriting and in the picture, and then we start to bring it forward, and it is in the consciousness. Perhaps it is a soul energy. I talk a lot about our soulmates, our soul team working in that kind of realm there that can bring it in. But I do think it's fascinating, and I think that having that idea that we can dream it into reality, it's like manifesting. Sometimes manifesting isn't always in our dreams, but I know I do a lot of that work in those early hours of the morning before I'm kind of awake. Is there a difference there, or is it kind of similar?
Yeah, like it's funny because there are many accounts in the book where people do come to these conclusions, this idea that it's not just they don't just feel like this is a standalone event, a coincidence, a kind of a like some of these people specify that because of this experience, because I dreamed of my love ahead of time, for example, I believe we were fated to meet, not necessarily in this life, but beforehand. There's this idea that comes out that, you know, there are a number of examples in the book where the husband will say to the wife, or the wife will say to the husband, I now believe that we made this agreement before our lives to actually meet in this life. And this is something that kind of comes out in the near death literature too. You see these accounts where people claim that while they're physically dead, they actually are presented, for example, with their future child, or they're presented with their future wife, etc. But then they claim years later that, well, I actually did meet this person. It was the same as that experience, for example. And you can see why people, you can see how maybe these kinds of experiences may actually engender beliefs in reincarnation in the first place, which is something that I do suggest. But yeah, it's certainly a possibility that there are these kind of agreements in the background of whatever is going on in the universe that we should meet in these lifetimes. Who knows? I mean, a lifetime may be the blink of an eye in the grander scheme of things. I often think maybe like when we think back, you mentioned before the interview began about, big changes in your life and how in the past feels kind of dreamlike at times. What if an entire lifetime could be just the same type of feeling, many lifetimes later? It's like, oh, remember that thing that happened 10 years ago? It feels like I was a different person, everything feels different. It could be just as simple as that, something you kind of brush off and remember fondly. I don't know, but it is interesting to consider the possibility.
It is interesting to consider that possibility, and I agree. I mean, yeah, as I'm sitting here thinking about that, because now I'm really really kind of remembering seeing that energy in my dream, that person come in, and I think that we can then start to put some of that out into the universe. I know in some of your early books you talk about the clairvoyance and the telepathy, but doesn't that still come into play here too?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, fundamentally, it does seem like a lot of these experiences are clairvoyant experiences or are telepathy experiences. Now, you could say you could argue whether it could be either of those or precognition, or it could be all of the above, a combination. I'm not sure, but certainly when you see certain accounts, for example, there was an account in the book from a 107-year-old man, T.J. Carney. This was a biography that his daughter wrote of him, and he was from Arkansas, and he dreamed of a woman ahead of time, his future lover, and he dreamed of her in a green coat, a very specific kind of green coat. But there were many other details too, such as the color of her eyes, for example. Now, when he finally met her, he was obviously astonished. Number one, that he recognized the face of the woman from his dream. But what was interesting is that she did have this similar. She had the same eyes. She had other details that were the same. But he noted at the time, oh, she didn't have the jacket. But sometime later, when he was in her house, he found the very same suede jacket that he had seen in the dream in her house, in her home. So to come back to your question, it's like the explanation there seems to be that there is some sort of, clairvoyant attainment of information, or perhaps the leaving of the body in dreams or something along those lines. For example, there are cultures in all across the world, but one example I often use is the Philippines, the Tarajans. When they have these kinds of experiences, when they come upon a place and they recognize it as somewhere they've dreamed before, or they recognize this feeling of deja vu, they easily accommodate that in their cosmology. They say, well, of course, your soul can leave your body at night. It can travel to places not only that you've been, but places you haven't been. So if they were TJ Carney in Arkansas in 1907, they would very easily, account for this experience, and it wouldn't necessarily raise an eyebrow. But for us, of course, these are mysterious, fascinating things. And yes, there is the suggestion of clairvoyance, telepathy, and potentially precognition in all of these accounts.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I do a lot of work with Reiki energy, and we work with this long distance symbol where we can send energy into time and space. And it's like almost like even allowing myself to use those techniques to continue dreaming and to bring it in. And then who knows? We'll see. But I think our dreams are fascinating, and there's so much energy that we can carry. And I definitely agree with you about astral traveling at night. I have to be careful not to do that too much.
Hmm.
Like put crystals under my pillows, right? Just to kind of, okay, I think we've had enough. Let's just stay grounded, especially like right now with all I'm going through and all the energy in the world. But I think we can really believe and really trust that our soul is guiding us to a lot of this energy, experiences, people, soul family. And it's just tuning into it rather than living in that linear world all the time. And I think you're hitting upon that with all the examples and the point that you're bringing forward.
Absolutely. I mean, what a kind of comforting and kind of beautiful way to conceptualize your existence. I mean, the idea that, there are machinations behind the scenes that are greater than ourselves, that, our existence and future has in some way been conceptualized. It's considered important. There are kind of important waypoints in these things we call our lives, because obviously we live in a kind of hyper materialist Western culture where we're considered to be these kind of random kind of algorithmic occurrences in in a kind of a space soup that kind of arrived here, etc., etc. But with these kinds of experiences, certainly people can come to some different conclusions, and that speaks to my work in general. Like my first book dealt with crisis apparitions, these experiences in which the individual encounters the form of a loved one at the very moment they happen to be dying at a distance. These are the kinds of experiences that suddenly, in an instant, kind of entirely kind of reorient the individual's sense of their place in the cosmos. These are experiences that can really change someone's sense of, what is life, what is death, what is the meaning to all this? Is it really just this kind of random cosmic soup, etc., etc.? But yeah, anything that can cause somebody to question those assumptions is probably a good thing in my book.
And I think that's where we are right now in humanity. Things are changing. We are shifting. The light coming in is very different. The energy of the galactic forces. I know that's brought a lot of significant energy, spirituality into my life right now. Just feeling that. It's almost like even living parallel lives, some of that galactic energy I channel. And I find that really fascinating. And I think we all can. Instead of this linear, come from the past, here I am, going to the future, work, 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 all of that. I think we can begin to live in all these different ways to help it with our soul so that we can rise above some of that stress and struggle and all the things that are going on in the world right now and start to lift that vibration and create the life we want. Like, we're the creators of our lives. I know we hear that. Sometimes people say, oh, that's just spiritual talk. But I truly believe I can every day choose how I want to wake up and be in that day. My choice.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And like what I tried to do with my work is to just suggest to the reader, there is a lot more kind of on the table than we realize. I mean, there is this kind of sense in Western culture, I find, that, somebody somewhere has it figured out, and there's this disenchantment of reality. There's the kind of deep fundamental magic of every single moment is kind of a little bit forgotten about. It's kind of been pushed to the wayside, and obviously that's the case because I'm not expecting people to be, praising, the sky every day or anything. We have jobs, we have lives, etc. But yeah, I think that with my work, I just want to show people, there is a lot more to consciousness than we potentially realize. We make these definitive statements in the West about consciousness, especially academia. I should be clear, not we, but they're often based on philosophical presuppositions regarding the nature of mind and matter and how they interact or don't interact, for that matter. So for me, it's not about dismissing that side of it, but it is about in kind of increasing the volume of data on the other side. I want there to be many hundreds of accounts and anecdotes that kind of potentially speak to something more.
Increasing the volume of data. I so agree. And your book does just that. There's so many different resources, so many different ways to look at it, just visions. Even you talk about the art, like seeing in the visions that the artists bring forward of what they've dreamed about. I think it's so true. I think we have a world. Just because we don't see it doesn't mean it doesn't exist, which is part of what I teach. I think it's so important to open up that consciousness that we all can have. Now, can I ask you, did this happen to you? Did you see your loved one in a dream?
Unfortunately, I did not have such an experience. But there was an experience of this kind in my family, though. Like my brother, for example, and I didn't remember this until I had finished writing the book, actually. And to be actually extra clear, only a few weeks ago, this was brought up in conversation. But it was just a very basic thing where, while we were speaking about the book, it was remembered that I think it was in 2012, I had kind of I just took it upon myself to just walk from my home to the beach, which is probably about probably 10 miles maybe. And it just kind of came up over me to visit the beach. I hadn't been there in a while. I just wanted to go. And it turned out my brother, I had stood at this particular spot on the beach and I was listening to a particular song. And he had the experience, he told me like the next week that, I had been at this particular spot and a particular beach with these particular towers and listening to this particular song. And I said, how did you know that? And he said, well, I dreamed about it. So it seems that something at least close to that kind of experience did occur to somebody in my family, but I can't claim that for myself, unfortunately. But there's still plenty of time, hopefully, to potentially have such an experience. You never know.
You never know. That's right. Well, I haven't seen the end result, but I know that I have dreamed about it. And I think you mentioned earlier too. Lots of times we talk about calling your baby. I know my daughter, she's had her first child, but she keeps telling me she's already seen her second. Same
Really?
idea in her
Wow.
dreams. Same idea, right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
I think that it can also extend to, our jobs, our work, our health, our career, so that it doesn't necessarily have to be about love.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Or even a person. So Deja
Yeah.
Reve covers a person, a place, or a thing. And like there are more kind of granular, specific terms, but they're very obscure. Even Deja Reve is very obscure and obtuse. It's not very well known and spoken about. Hopefully, this will help change that. I don't know. Like, so something that I'm really interested in and I'm writing about at the moment is what's actually, well, so Deja Reve, but dealing specifically with when you recognize a place ahead of time as opposed to a person. And in many cases, it's all both occur in the same account, for example. But like, if you excuse me, I could give a quick example of one that I found in the Irish Times. This is a newspaper from my own country in 1931. And it was fascinating because it was enclosed just in a year of progress report of our zoological society. And it was regarding a lecture given on the interest and beauty of birds by a Reverend Canon Charles Raven. Now, he says that he had, before opening these lectures, he would tell the students that during the Great War, he had a very strange dream that while staying in France, he dreamed for many nights consecutively of birds nesting upon the rocky shores of a little island. He said that whenever he would reacquaint himself with sleep, the vision would persistently return, seemingly wishing to impress itself upon him. It wasn't at all a place he recognized. 15 years later, however, Raven was invited to Dublin, Ireland, my own home country and county, to deliver lectures in the world-renowned Trinity College. While visiting, a friend took him to Ireland's Eye, a small uninhabited island that is 1.5 kilometers off the coast, and he says, quote unquote, there I saw the spot of my dreams, with the rocks and the spray beating up the cliffs, and myriads of seabirds supremely careless of my presence. This is interesting to me, not only in and of itself, but the fact that it took 15 years for this dream to be fulfilled. Because a lot of the explanations for these types of things are false memory. Of course, if you dream of somebody, you're eventually going to see somebody who looks like them. But if it's taking 15 years and the details are so specific, you would expect the individual to see an environmental kind of factor that would trigger that if it was random, just trigger that feeling of, oh, this is where I dreamed before. But no, with Raven, he was convinced that 15 years later, as he recorded previously, he'd had dreamed of this spot before.
Yeah. That is fascinating. Yeah. And sometimes we give up. Oh, it's never going to happen. And then we lose that vibration of energy. But I think that's a great story to just like remind us, like, we're the ones that put parameters on time. It doesn't always have to be in that moment that we dream it or right away according to what we want, but that we can still keep holding the dream, right? We've heard that. Hold the dream, see the dream, be the dream. And that's kind of what we're talking about here. And allowing ourselves to open up and I think bring it in closer to us. That's what I would like to say and believe.
Absolutely. I mean, there are a number of accounts in the book which deal with these longer time frames and like who are like again, what is time? Like, I mean, is 15 years a long time in this context? I don't know. I mean, if you have, I mean, you can have 15, really bad years in your life, and one extraordinary year can make you almost forget all of them. I mean, these things are, it's strange, mysterious time, love, dreams, yeah. So I'll wrap that thought up there.
There you go. Yeah, no, I do. And I think it's very inspiring because our dreams are important. And so often we like, oh, I can't sleep, or we take medications, or we don't really tune into our dreams. But it's all very valuable time for us to process energy. And I think too, like set out what our dreams are. What are we, our soul, what are we going for? And I think we can use that with intention, especially when we go to bed. I know I'm going to be doing a little bit more work on this after reading some of these stories and these ideas. I think it's really important. Is there a
Yes.
goal? Is there a purpose for this work?
Absolutely. Yes, some of the ways, and just first of all, yes, the fundamental goal for me with my work is, first of all, my fundamental focus is veridical experiences. These are in the Greek from veridicus, which means truth telling. In other words, Visions and dreams in which the inner world of the individual correlates directly with the outer world. So, in other words, like we mentioned with the crisis apparitions, I saw my grandmother. She was wearing a particular coat and waving goodbye. I got a phone call 5 minutes later that she actually did die, and she happened to be wearing that coat when she died, for example. So, that's a direct correlation between the inner world and the outer world. So, for me, that's my interest, and my goal is simply to allow the reader a deep sense of how commonly these things are experienced deeply through time and cross cultures from the most obscure sources from every culture you can imagine, and in that way just kind of give people a sense of, mystery, of strangeness, of, how much there is still on the table, how little we still know about these things, and how much there potentially is to learn about ourselves and about the nature of things and about mind and the universe and how these things interact, and just kind of question our assumptions a little bit if possible. That would be my main goal.
Yeah, I know right before, which is a great goal because I think we need to expand, again, expand our consciousness and open up to beyond what we see in what we hear on the news or what we see in a book or, right, that linear way of thinking. So I definitely agree with that, opening up and expanding the concept. And why not about love for sure?
Mm,
I think we all just want to be loved. Yeah, right?
absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, I know when right before my father died,
Mhm.
my mom was calling us in, and I was running over there, and I was in Whole Foods, and I got a receipt, and on the receipt, the total was $19.26, which is what his date of birth was. And at the
Wow.
same time, my sister, who lived up in Princeton, she was texting me a rainbow. So it was like all of this energy alerting us all, gather, come. My father was about to pass. So I agree. I think we can have all those kind of vision sights, messages when we're in the soul energy of who we are.
Mm.
And that is a
Yeah,
lot of what I teach for sure. Yeah.
absolutely. Like there is an extraordinary energy around death, and obviously, death isn't necessarily associated with it's associated with kind of morbidness these days, but like there is an extraordinary energy that collects around death, and these kinds of experiences that you and your sister had are very common. There are it seems that for some people, for whatever reason, the universe kind of extends a grapevine and suggests, this isn't the end. This isn't what you thought it was. Consciousness isn't what you thought it was. Death isn't what you thought it was. And, there's some work, like just recently I was reading a book, Across the River Styx. I may have gotten the name slightly wrong, but it's about terminal lucidity. It was written by Michael Nam and two colleagues. And in that, there is actually some work done where quantum random number generators are placed around uh, emergency rooms. And there are a lot of protocols put in place. These things are done very carefully. Everything is agreed upon. But this is somewhat suggestive work. I mentioned there is this energy around death, and we see it in these experiences that we mentioned. But it would be interesting if we could have some sort of objective measure of that, which isn't my main interest, but it is interesting to point out there has been work done, I think Vasilios Basios, and these generators generated patterns that went far beyond, they generated patterns which were deviated from the random firings at the 6 hours before the death, during the death, and then stopped when the death occurred. So there is actually some intriguing corollary evidence that this type of energy does exist around death. But those are not strong correlations in my work. I just thought I'd kind of bring it up as it popped up when you asked the question.
Yeah, I hear you on that. And as a side note, I do work a lot with helping women, especially prepare bodies for death once they've passed in our community. So I am
Okay.
around that energy a lot. I've also had guests on the show talking about coma, the same idea. What
Mm,
happens to the brain when we're induced into a coma, right? And so it is
mm.
fascinating. And personally, I had a near death experience right before COVID. I
Oh,
didn't
wow.
realize how intense that affected me until I started just like fracturing and fracturing more and more from my soul. And then that led me to a bunch of different experiences and even down to Tioe Takana, past life, portals of energy, which is what you're reminding me of when you were talking about seeing places, the same idea of that energy and
Mm,
that phenomena that comes forward with that. So I do think it all ties in, but specifically your book does deal with love at second sight, which is
mm.
another idea of second sight. That's pretty fascinating to think about too.
Absolutely. I mean, it's interesting you mentioned about your near-death experience though, because yeah, a lot of near-death experiences suggest that post the near-death experience, they then begin to have all these other experiences that are kind of extrasensory perception related, whether it's increased sensitivity. Like I remember one near-death experience where a woman said that after when I came home, I knew every time a visitor was going to arrive, I knew they were on the way. Or I knew when somebody was going to call just before they called, etc. Or I could put my hand on a book and kind of know the general contents of the book. And in many cases, these capacities tapered off the further away they got from the near death experience. But the fact that they are kind of engendered by that experience is fascinating. And your own account ties into that. But as for the kind of love at second sight in my book, there are near death experiences in which this is involved too. As I mentioned, like there is an account in the book where an individual he's near death and he finds himself in a field with a particular house and a particular child and a particular woman. And it doesn't strike him till many years later when he moves house and he's with his wife and he's with his child and he sees the environment. It strikes him, wow, this is exactly the place that I saw. This is, where I was fated to be. And I can't imagine because it hasn't happened to me, but one can only imagine the comfort, the meaning, the sense of just great awe that must overcome somebody in that moment.
And I think that's really important. That sense, that great awe, that sense of like, yes, I am in alignment with my soul's journey. I think that's just such a beautiful feeling. And we can have that in many different situations. But as you're explaining that, I really do. I think that's a beautiful way to recognize that energy. And I think all of it is similar in many ways in terms of like just being in the soul energy and journeying. And the body does have a sense of remembering, and we can travel and we can then I think so, bring these energies to us in the physical world as well.
Absolutely. I mean, there are it's funny, I'm looking a lot into terminal lucidity recently. It's very interesting, this idea that, and this speaks to the kind of assumptions I was mentioning in academia earlier, like these experiences in which, sometime very close to death, most commonly close to death, the individual who had a degenerative brain disease, for example, whether it's a type of Alzheimer's, a dementia, something along these lines, they suddenly retain their consciousness, alertness, and their knowledge of things. They remember names, people, places. They carry out full conversations. They may paint in a way they haven't for a decade. In some cases, they've been nonverbal this entire time until this moment. And when you read neuroscientists approaching this kind of data, you read such things as like there was one guy who literally said, when I read stuff like this, I can't actually believe it's happening, because if these memories are suddenly coming back, where could they possibly be physically stored? In other words, his assumption philosophically is that it has to have been physically stored. But if we're coming from this kind of external potential consciousness soul type of aspect, of course that would be the case. So of course, if it's stored externally, then it could stream in different ways, or when the soul is detaching from the body the closer it gets to death. Perhaps it's some sort of mechanism specifically to preserve, that kind of, specifically for the sake of those around the dying. I don't know. But yeah, the point is that these assumptions about the nature of things all constantly are holding us back these days in the West. And I'm not here to say I know the answer to these things, but I'm here to say, there are many things that we don't have the answers to, despite how confidently we suggest that we do.
Well, I'm here to say this is what I teach. So I do know this. So yeah, I
Mm.
can be more affirmative about that because it is what I teach. And it
Hmm.
is, we can work in those higher chakras, which hold this information. Now, it may not be in our English language or whatever language you speak, but it could be in signs and symbols. And that's where we reach up because the body does. When I take people on these past lives through the Akashic realm and they feel it, it's like there's a sense within them. They don't remember in the mind, but then something does happen. So it is very similar, not to get off track, but yeah, I
No.
can. I can affirmatively say that this is the work I do, and I do find it fascinating and the healing that comes
Mm.
forward. Just like you were saying too, when he saw that land in the house, and it's like, yes, it just feels so good to have that alignment come forward for sure. Yeah.
Absolutely. One can only imagine, and especially when it comes to these realms of love, to these moments of like connection and just empathy and just kind of feeling like my life has meaning, or we have connection with another individual, etc., etc. So yeah, I think that with the focus on kind of love in so many of these accounts, it does potentially speak to how important love itself may be in our lives. And just this is also something that comes out in the near death experience, which I find fascinating. Like the word that most commonly comes out is love, for example. I think followed by light. It's one or the other way around. But like oftentimes when people have these near death experiences or these types of déjà rêvé experiences, they describe just feeling this sense of love that goes so much deeper and kind of that, like they say, like any even the most intense love I had for my child, for example, couldn't even compare to this. So one can only imagine what something like that must feel like. So it is incredible to consider the possibility that whatever this thing is that we call love, we just happen to call it love, but it may be this fundamental energy that permeates the universe, for example. Like we just happen to call it love when we experience it, but maybe it's the ground floor. Maybe, we are an adumbration of it as opposed to, it being the results of the movements of oxytocin through the brain, for example, because there are no movements of oxytocin through the brain during the near death experience when people are experiencing the most love they've ever experienced. So, yes, perhaps it speaks to the nature of the universe. I'm not sure.
Yeah, that is quite fascinating to think about. And many times people will ask me like, well, do you believe in twin flame or do you believe in like soulmates? And so yeah, those are all different kind of concepts. But as you've just talked about, like love is all around us. It begins within us. And my inclination after talking to you is like, well, go into your dreams and bring that in because sometimes twin flames are not the easiest relationship. And I have a whole nother perspective on twin flames. I think that's a part of us that we
Yeah.
seek out. And then soulmates sometimes come in here to break up your stuff. So, yeah, be
Mm.
careful what you wish for. But I think when we can honor the dreams that we have and trust it, just like you're bringing this information out to give us some confirmation, because many people do, and then they just kind of wash it away. Oh, I just made it up. Oh, it's not true. Oh, it's not happening. But this in your book gives us that confirmation to help us to really appreciate what we do see in our dreams and how we can continue to work forward with them. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, uh, a lot of like I would say that for some people it would be interesting to potentially begin to journal, and just keep a closer eye on these things, because there are a number of accounts in the book where the individual will say like this occurred to me, this déjà rêvé occurred to me while I specifically began, attempting to have such experiences. Like I began a dream journal. I started looking more closely at my dreams. I think Gary Lachman himself mentions this in the foreword that he started kind of looking closer at his journal and noticed, oh, this is an exact description of this particular person, for example. So yeah, there is an active role that you can take if you are interested in potentially having this type of experience, and just in general, I think kind of apprehending the dream world in general is probably beneficial for a lot of people. It just opens up this other realm, this other kind of imaginal realm of this kind of just thought and escape and just art and just like color and whatever. I think it's enervating for people. I really do.
I so agree. I so agree. I think it can help us, and I think we can go into it with that perspective. Let me
Mm.
bring it in. And it is taught that the more you honor your dreams, journal your dreams, the more they're going to keep coming forward versus waking up and like letting them go because they will. The minute you come here, wake up, put your feet on the floor, all of a sudden that dream you thought you were going to remember, it is like gone, right?
Mm.
So there is something to be said about that. So, Daniel, how fascinating all the stories and all that we've talked about today. It is quite interesting. Where can we find your work? Are you teaching? I know you just mentioned you have another book you're working on.
Yeah, thanks. You can find Deja Rêvé at Amazon.com and pretty much all good booksellers or the publisher, Inner Traditions, for example. And you can find me at X on near_death_FE. That's where you can find me. I often post kind of little tidbits of cross-cultural accounts, historical accounts, maybe some reposts here and there. And no, I'm not teaching anything specifically, but yeah, I just hope that people kind of reading the book and the many hundreds of accounts included throughout the books, at the very least, kind of leave with a sense of, oh, there is a mystery here, there is something potentially of meaning here, and just any kind of interest in that direction is a nice thing.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So I will put all that information in the show notes and we'll be looking out for this to come out. Has it been published? Is it out into the world or is it brand new? I think it
Yep,
just
it's
came
just
out,
come
right?
out on January 20th. So it's been out
Yeah.
just under a week now. And
Yeah, there you go.
yeah.
And yes, a huge shout out to Intertraditions and all that they do, bringing this work forward for sure. Yeah. So as we go to close, I like to come back and ask, how do you feel that working in this whole concept of Déjà Rêvé can help to empower the spirit right now?
Mm. Well, I think it will differ, for a lot of people, but I think there are many benefits that can benefit many different people differently to give a very vague political answer. But like one of the obvious ones would be like, these kinds of feelings that we were speaking about, these kinds of moments of awe, these moments of change, these moments of like, I mean, there are dreams in the book where people decide, oh, I'm going to move continents based on this dream. And, or I'm going to, like, there are dreams which I'm going to specifically seek out this person, for example. There's a part in one of the chapters called I Must Find You. These are dreams where the individual doesn't dream and then coincidentally comes upon somebody. They actually set out to look for them themselves. So I think for people, those kinds of experiences can be deeply empowering and give them a deeper sense of connection with the universe and just a kind of a general sense of meaning that may not have been there before, a sense of connection.
I so agree. A deeper sense of connection with the universe and
Mm,
with love.
absolutely,
Yeah.
and we don't have that deep a connection with the universe in the West, let's be honest. I mean, especially compared to our kind of ancestors, we are greatly detached. I mean, we only have to look to the stars and see how washed out they are by the city lights, for example, to know how less connected we are to the cosmos than our ancestors. And that's only the tip of the iceberg. That's not even going into dreams. A lot of these people took dreams so seriously and they spoke of them and it wasn't just these vague wishing upon a star type of ideas. Many people who propose to dream the kinds of dreams I deal with, these veridical dreams, their reputation would immediately suffer if they turned out not to be true. So in many cases, these were very carefully studied, and yeah, I think that type of connection with things can benefit people.
I so agree. Yeah. Well, all the best of luck with your book and all the work that you do. Thank you so much for joining us today. To your
Thank you so
spirit.
much for having me. I appreciate it.
Yes, what a truly mind expanding conversation. A huge thank you to our guest for sharing his profound insights into the world of Déjà Rêvé. It is a powerful reminder that our dreams are just not fleeting images, but can be potent visions for our future, guiding us towards our soul's path and the people we are destined to meet. The consciousness of our dreams can lead us to a deeper sense of connection with love and the universe. As we close out this episode, let's carry with us the fiery and inspiring energy of this unique time. The confluence of the solar eclipse and the year of the fire horse is a cosmic invitation to live more passionately, to love more openly, and to chase our dreams with strength and determination of a galloping horse. This is our time to dream, to feel, and to create the life we truly desire. So I encourage you to pay attention to your dreams, to journal them, and to trust the whispers of our soul. Let the energy of the fire horse fuel your journey forward. Embrace the magic that is all around you and within you. Thank you so much for joining me again today on the Empowered Spirit Show. Until next time, may your spirit be empowered and your dreams be your guide. I am your host, Terri Heiman. To your spirit, namaste.